Are you there, Chuck? All righty. There he is.
Hey, Gary, how you doing?
Chuck, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. Good for Friday. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, Chuck. I just was doing some last minute tweaks to my presentation. I'm just, the more I'm out in the world talking to people about these ideas, they resonate with so many different people on so many different levels. It's so exciting.
Yeah. And we're really pleased to have you. We don't have usually big names like you on our webinars, so.
Well, that flattery will get you everywhere, but I don't think of myself as a big name. I just think of myself as, I was talking to a good friend of mine this morning, Chuck. I think where I got lucky is I found an interesting question.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? I just like that. I'm just trying to figure these things out. Like, how do underdogs win?
Yeah.
Right? That's really what it's all about for me. Chuck, what I was going to ask you is, we don't want to do a poll, but I wanted to start off by using the chat to ask, how many people on this call are interested in entrepreneurship for themselves? How many are interested in trying to learn how to teach entrepreneurship to others? And maybe how many of both?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me a feel of the audience?
Yeah. I'd say most of the audience is faculty, is probably the biggest majority of our, because we had 117 registered as of yesterday.
Okay.
And typically, when we do, these are free webinars, of course, if we get 120 registered, we might have 60, usually about half show up.
that's what we got, about the same, 40 to 50% actually show up.
But yeah, I think most of our faculty, let me log in and look on my other computer.
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Don. Don, how are you?
Hi, Charles.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing very, very well. I came a little bit early because I wanted to make sure I didn't get locked out.
Yeah.
So if you'd like me to log out while y'all prepare.
No, you're fine. I was just watching the 5 videos Lisa sent me that you guys did down there, and you're featured pretty prominently in there. So.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah, those were great.
Don, I think we met at NACI. We've been bumping into each other.
NACI, and then I met you again and spent a little time with you at the Mission Inn in Riverside.
Yeah, that's right. That's where it was. Where it was. Yeah.
And I'll be joining you again because I didn't finish that course. I'm going to join you for the second cohort that starts in a few weeks.
Okay, good. You're in the July cohort?
I am.
Oh, fabulous. That's great, Don. I'm so happy to hear that. That's sold out, man. By the grace of God, we started doing the facilitator training online a month before COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And we're finding out in a lot of ways, it's actually more impactful because you've got time to go out and kind of digest some of these ideas and put them into practice and then kind of come back.
Yes.
As opposed to the 3-day event where it's more of a fire hose kind of situation. Right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm excited. I'm really excited, Gary.
That's great. I'm super excited you're going to be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I'll go on mute so I won't bother you all.
Okay. Yeah, so we were just talking about, so you have the questions you want to ask him and just have him respond in the chat box, I guess, then?
Yeah. So I'm not going to get into too much about how to teach it. I think it's just really about what it is, how to develop it. And then, I think we can have some conversation around how to develop this in our students. But I want to make this interactive. I want to give people the chance to ask questions and so forth.
Yeah, okay.
And create a dialogue, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, no, that'd be good. And I'll mention that too when my introduction too, that they can, ask any questions during, I guess, with this type in the chat box, and then we can try. I can try to monitor that too, and at the end we can try to catch any questions as well. So
yeah. Will people have the ability to like ask a question live, or are they restricted to chat only?
No, they can ask a question live if they want to. They just have to unmute themselves. So if you're comfortable with them, they can ask it verbally that way too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would encourage folks to ask their questions in the chat box or write them down. Let's save them for the end.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. I would rather just like let's roll, and then I'm going to try to keep that to maybe 35 minutes or so, and so we can leave 20, 25 minutes for some Q&A.
Q&A sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah. The other thing, Chuck, is just something to think about, but there's always an awkward pause at the end, and it's amplified even a little bit more on Zoom. Even in an auditorium, you say, like, what questions do you have? There's a pregnant pause, and sometimes, the moderator will.
Yeah, I can lead off with a question first while people are thinking about their questions.
That's it. If you can do that, it kind of gives enough social proof that others start to kind of chime in, right? Because I've done talks where, what questions do you have? And the moderator will wait like 15 seconds and just go, okay, then I guess we're done.
Yeah.
And I find that if you get through that pregnant pause, like people will go on with the Q&A like longer than the talk. And that's what we really want to get to, or close to that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, are you in Ohio today, or where are you at?
I'm in Ohio. Yeah. I'm not, Chuck, this is the longest I've gone without being on a plane in like a decade. But I'm using the time to think and research and, coming to wrapping up like a really exciting book project. I think I've been talking to you about that. It's taken me, damn near 6 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, it's beyond Ice House. It's really understanding the social, environmental, and situational factors that encourage or inhibit this behavior, right? How to develop it in yourself, but in your, not only, but in your children, your students, your workforce, and creating like entrepreneurial learning societies is really what ultimately my goal is, right? To learn how to learn and unlearn and relearn.
Right.
That's the power of the entrepreneurial mindset, Chuck, in my view.
Yeah. Oh, you asked about audience. We might have some students on too, because on Wednesday we just wrapped up a big student internship project with the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center here. We're placing students around the state with NASDAQ startup companies, and we had their presentation day on Wednesday. So all the students gave a 2-minute presentations of what they learned and experienced. And I encouraged the students to, if they wanted to, join us today. So we might get a few of the students, and there was faculty on that too. We had faculty mentors. So we'll see. I don't know if any students will join us as well. But
good.
They will. Yeah.
Good. I just wrapped up I did a 4-week-long faculty development session for a liberal arts college near Fargo, North Dakota. So it was 2 75-minute sessions per week over 4 weeks, department chairs in a liberal arts college. And I was amazed at the extent to which they got so excited about, this is, they said, wow, I came into this thinking that entrepreneurship was about starting a business and making a lot of money. And now I realize it's really about problem solving. Right. And that's what, that's what I've been thinking about lately and writing about is like the way forward is about trial and error. It's less about expert leadership. Right. And so we need these skills. We need these trial and error skills to navigate, because nobody knows what the heck is going on in the,
Yeah. I was just joking with my wife earlier that our webinar starts at 11 and our lawn service will show up at 11 a.m. And sure enough, they're outside the window with the mowers. And, it's kind of with Zoom when we were doing our student presentations the other day. One of our students said the same thing. The lawn people showed up right when he get his presentation. And then we had another students in the Central Valley. There was an earthquake that hit right when they were starting their presentation. So we had to delay and let them come back. It was like 5.4, I think.
Wow.
Kind of down by the mountains there, Lone Pine, I think.
Yeah. Where are you, Chuck? Where in the state are you?
I'm in Fairfield, which is about halfway between San Francisco and Sacramento, kind of over the hill from Napa. So.
Gotcha.
We'll give it another minute or two here. We're right at 11, but we'll give it another minute or two. It looks like we've got 18 on, but.
All right, let me get my slides ready to go here.
In fact, I'll go ahead, before I forget, I need to make you a co-host so you can share your...
Yep.
So there, I made you a co-host, so when we get... I just have this one slide, but then we'll let you switch over after I do the intro here.
Got it. I see some friendly faces here. There's Kathleen. Hi, Kathleen.
Hey, Gary, I unmuted myself, Chuck, for literally 15 seconds to be able to say hi to Gary, and of course, welcome to everyone else. But super to see you, Gary. What a gift and a lovely shot in the arm this Friday morning. So
awesome.
Thanks, Chuck, for giving me a second there.
Yeah, no, that's good. Do we have any other regional directors on today? Let's see.
Good morning, it's Lisa Kiplinger-Kennedy. I'm on.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Gary. It's great to see you.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here. I'm super excited about this opportunity.
Hey, Gary, Rob Newman here. Hello.
Rob, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I was just telling Chuck, by the grace of God, we started doing online facilitator training before the COVID hit, and we found out it actually works better than in-person training.
It's amazing how that works.
And it's like we're selling out. It's like now we're getting people from all over the world showing up at these trainings. We got people from South Africa, from India, from China, from Europe. It's crazy.
And Rob, I didn't even recognize you there too much. You got a good beard going on and stuff now?
Yeah. Well, I'm in my aging rock star phase.
Okay.
I like the Anthony Bourdain. I'm in that stay the hell off my lawn phase of my life.
All right, I'm going to go back on mute since it's getting to be about time.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's 2 after, so why don't we go ahead and get started? Hopefully, I'm Chuck Eason. I'm the statewide director for business and entrepreneurship, and hopefully everyone can see my intro slide here today. And I want to welcome everybody to our monthly webinar series, which we have been running now for 3 or 4 months, and been glad to have a lot of you attending as faculty, and we've had some great speakers, and we have another great speaker today that's joining us. We have Gary Schoeniger, who's both the entrepreneur and author, and also the founder and CEO of the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. I apologize for the background noise. My lawn service people just showed up right outside the window. Of course, right at 11 when we start. But for today, we're going to have Gary present for probably about 30, 35 minutes or so, and we'll have some time for Q&A and interaction at the end. So I want to encourage all of you, too, to put your questions in the chat box, and we'll be sure to catch those at the end. And Gary always like to have interaction and feedback, so I think he probably enjoys that part more than probably the presenting part of it, I imagine, as well. But other than that, I think we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Gary. And Gary had a couple questions he wanted to ask to put in the chat box to kind of gather some information for our audience. So maybe, Gary, if you want to lead off with those, and we can gather some information for today.
That sounds great. Thank you, Chuck. And thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar. I'm super excited. I see a lot of friendly faces here. So I'm excited to be part of this. And so thanks for the opportunity, Chuck. What I wanted to ask in the chat, and I think I already know the answer based on some of the conversations, but go into the chat function and just let me know How many of you are interested in entrepreneurship for your own benefit? How many are interested in learning how to teach entrepreneurship or how to encourage these attitudes, behaviors, and skills in others? And how many, would say both? Just curious. I think I know the answer, but, you never really know for sure, right? Both. My own interest. Okay. Teaching to others, both, all of the above, how to teach. Oh, you guys are awesome. Awesome. All right. We're going to let it rip. Lisa, my own work, benefit. That's the thing about this training. Like a lot of folks come to our entrepreneurial mindset training, workshops and seminars and so forth. And they think, okay, I'm here to learn something. And they don't really expect it to be impacted by the work. And I'm not trying to say that, this is that impactful, but that's very often the outcome. And that's what is exciting for me. K-12 partners, awesome, Kathleen. So let me dive right in here. I've got a presentation I want to start with, and then we'll leave some time at the end. I'll try to leave at least 20 minutes for Q&A, hopefully a little more.
Gary, too, I'm kind of curious in the chat box, maybe people could put in, I'm curious how many of our attendees have attended like one of your trainings or facilitator trainings for entrepreneurial mindset. So any of you could put that in there too. Is that Gary
how many
doing training
Ice
around
House certified?
Yeah, Ice House,
right?
Yeah, certified. Yeah, it'd be interesting if you enter that in the chat box too.
Yeah, Ice House certified. Rob, yeah. Okay, UN is saying first time, never. Astrid, that was my grandmother's name. Hello, Astrid. I talked to you. Okay, great. James Spear, I am certified. Okay, so the certified Ice House facilitators, they're just like gluttons for punishment. They keep coming back to these things. That's just beyond me. Refire my entrepreneurial spirit. Awesome, Kim. I have not attended Gary's trainings. Haven't heard of him before. Intro would be great. Gary Rubin. Gary, happy to chat with you. Stacy is certified. Okay. Fabs, more folks certified, never attended. All right. So we're all over the spectrum.
Yeah. Let me do a little more of an intro for you, Gary, since we have a few people that haven't heard of you. So you got some new audience too.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't do a very good job introducing you before, but so I mentioned Gary is the CEO of the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative, and he's also the co-author of Who Owns the Ice House book, which is basically the book that they based their entrepreneurial learning or entrepreneurial mindset coursework on. And if you haven't attended any of those, we've been doing trainings around the state, and I think you were originally funded through the Kauffman Foundation when you put all this together, I believe.
That's correct.
Gary has been a keynote speaker for us several times around the state. I know he did remember first time was a big event we had in LA with about 230 of our faculty. So for those of you who haven't heard of him, you should be pleased that you have a tremendous speaker with us today, and definitely be sure to check out both the Who Owns the Ice House book, and then check out the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative too. You can go to their website and learn a little more about him. I'll turn back over to you. I should have done a better job introducing you. I figured everybody knew who you were.
No, that's good. That's why the little chat questions at the beginning just help. When I do live events, it's like walking in the room. It helps read the room. Like I want to make sure I kind of have the best understanding of my audience before I lay into them. So as Chuck said, my work is focused on the entrepreneurial mindset, right? That's really been the focus of my work for darn near 30 years now. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. And we specialize in entrepreneurial mindset education, professional development training, and courseware. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. But as we said in the sort of the title to this webinar is, the world has changed in ways that now require everyone to think like an entrepreneur. And that's like blatantly obvious to everyone, I would think, right? And I even mean like pre-COVID, that the rate of change, the technological advancement, the rate of of change in the world, let alone, you know, the global pandemic, is disrupting the status quo. And so what I've been trying to do for the last 25 years or more is essentially I've been trying to figure out how underdogs win. Like, that's the question I've been out. 1991 when that question landed in my brain. How do people who have no particular advantage in life manage to alter their place in the socioeconomic structure? How do they overcome the obstacles? How do they create meaning and prosperity in their lives when they're starting from zero or less than zero? How does that happen? And, you know, that's right away I realized, well, they're innovative and entrepreneurial. I mean, that's sort of a given right out of the rip, right? But I spent a long time interviewing entrepreneurs, and then I began to study the research in behavioral, cognitive, social psychology to understand what are the underlying beliefs. I mean, you know, we've all heard these underdog stories, right? Someone starts, you know, they're immigrant or you know, they come from poverty or whatever. They have nothing, limited education, very limited resources, and they build something, they create something that, you know, creates jobs in their community, improves people's lives, creates some kind of wealth and meaning for the entrepreneur themselves. Like, how does that keep happening? We all know the story. We have all heard the story, right? And I realized that a lot of us sort of, for a default assumption that many of us make is that it has to do with your personality traits. So our default assumption is that it's dispositional. Some of them say, well, you just got lucky. I mean, there's other, but we tend to attribute these success stories, which I'm a little bit reluctant to use that term, but we tend to attribute them to things that are beyond our control. And what I began to realize is a lot of their advantage, the distinction, comes from their underlying beliefs, right? So that begs the question, well, what the hell are those beliefs, right? And why do they think that way, I think is the more important question, right? What's happening within the person and the situation that causes them to think that way? So that's sort of the premise for my research. And you know, entrepreneurship is very popular in colleges, universities, schools all over the world. I've lectured all over the world. You know, most of us are still tethered to this idea of entrepreneurship as the domain of the elite kids at Stanford or Harvard or Babson or whatever. They come up with, you know, these world-changing ideas. They're so-called unicorns that come up with ideas, these billion-dollar ideas, and so on and so forth. And these stories dominate the headlines, and they distort our thinking, not only about how to be entrepreneurial, but more importantly, they distort our thinking about who can be entrepreneurial, right? So I don't mean to say that everyone can be a Mark Zuckerberg. And I'm saying that, like, not everyone gets to walk out in the desert and stick a toothpick in the sand and have a gusher come out. That's so far outside of the normal experience of the everyday entrepreneur. But our thinking is skewed by the Silicon Valley narrative, I'll call it, right? And as I said, my work has been in, you know, the observations in an analysis of the underdog entrepreneur, the people who who have no particular advantage in life, people that don't have, 180 IQ, they're not at Stanford, they don't have MBAs, they don't have rich relatives, ordinary people. And I've sort of cobbled together what I'm calling entrepreneurial mindset theory. And I'm just going to lay this out for you. it's sort of a humanistic view of entrepreneurship, right? It's rooted in this fundamental belief in the extraordinary ability of ordinary people. I've also come to believe through this work that non-entrepreneurial behavior is learned. That humans are just like every other mammal, that we are innately equipped with both the desire and the capacity to learn everything we need to learn to adapt and thrive in our environments, right? That not everyone wants to start a business, but we are innately driven to be engaged in work that matters, that has value to others. We are innately curious and with an innate desire to learn and to grow, right? Those are innate tendencies, but they're fragile and they get thwarted and they get undermined very easily. A part of my theory is that the causes of entrepreneurial behavior are situational rather than dispositional. And I could say that in a different way. They are dispositional, but they get squashed, right? We've been trained to think like employees is another way to think of it like that, right? But perhaps most importantly, that an entrepreneurial activity, behavior is essential not only for economic growth and individual prosperity, but for organizational and societal resilience, as well as psychological and societal well-being, right? I really don't care how much money you made as an entrepreneur. I'm interested in how did you impact the people around you and what happened to you in the process? How did that move you closer towards self-actualizing? That's what I'm interested in and why I'm interested in entrepreneurship. So some of you are familiar with this idea. I'm going to use this concept of transformation theory to sort of break entrepreneurship down into its first principles. And I'm going to do this very briefly. So transformation theory is developed by a guy named Dr. George Land. And he used it to describe the phases of change within any living system. And it's really quite useful for understanding entrepreneurial behavior as distinct from managerial behavior. So what Land is saying, there are three phases of change. There's a discovery phase, there's a growth phase, and there's an obsolescence or a reinvention phase, right? And what Land is saying is that there's these three phases are inescapable phases. They're inescapable aspects of life. Each phase requires separate rules for survival. And the trick, according to Land, is to understand which phase you are in so that you know which rules to apply. And this is where I would ask you for some homework to like Google search the definition of maladaptive. That's basically what maladaptive means. You're clinging to one set of beliefs and skills and tools, and you're ignoring the changes in the situation, right? That's a long-winded definition. These orange dots are the moments in time when the rules for survival change. Now, I said moments in time. They're not moments. Because the break points come, they're never obvious. We deny them, right? There's not a memo that shows up in your inbox on Monday morning. It says, hey, Lisa, the rules for survival have changed. You got to switch it up, right? It's never a clear, obvious thing. And that's part of the challenge we face, right? And it basically works like this. In the discovery phase, you learn how to survive. if you're an animal in the wilderness, a human being, an organism, a company, doesn't matter. The first phase, you're figuring out how to survive. Well, ask yourself, as a human being, how do we survive? Well, we survive by making ourselves useful to other human beings. So what I'm trying to get at here is I'm trying to break entrepreneurship down to what Elon Musk refers to as first principles, right? Take the complexity out of it. So we're learning how to survive. Then we go do the thing we learn how to do. And we get better at it. So we grow, we become more adept at it, right? We become more agile. We learn, about our thing and we grow. And then eventually we hit a second break point when the growth starts to slow. And that's an indication that we're either fading into obsolescence, maybe it's retirement time, or maybe the world has changed and your skill set, your knowledge, your abilities have become obsolete. And now you got to reinvent yourself, right? That's basically how transformation theory works. Here's the problem, right? There's two things I really want to point out here. The first is, like, nothing fails like success. This is Lance's quote, and here's what he means by this. We survive, the attitudes and skills that are absolutely essential to survive in column 2 are the very attitudes and skills that will prevent you from transitioning into reinventing yourself or reinventing your organization, your community, whatever, right? That's what he meant when he said nothing fails like success. When the growth starts to slow, what do? We try to double down on column 2. We try to pedal faster. We try to make everyone do a little bit more for a little bit less, work a little bit harder, take a little bit of haircut, whatever. And that might work for a minute, but it's never the solution, right? This is what Einstein meant when he said you can't solve the problems with the same thinking you used when you created them. So the second point that I want to make here is that most of us learn how to make ourselves useful to other humans in a very controlled way. It's called formalized education, right? And so there's not a lot of ambiguity. There's not a lot of discovery going on. It's like, do you want to be an electrician or do you want to be a surgeon? You want to be a healthcare worker? You want to be a social worker? You're kind of reading from a menu, but the paths are well known. They're well-established paths. There's well-defined rules for those paths, right? And then you go into the workplace and it's basically the same. The assumption is that the useful thing has already been determined and we're expected to fulfill a predetermined, well-defined role, right? That's problematic also. So the point that I wanted to make here is Jared Diamond said it better in his book, Collapse. The values to which people cling most stubbornly under inappropriate conditions are the values that were previously the source of their greatest triumphs. That's another way of saying nothing fails like success, right? So part of this webinar is about asking you all, we all have to start asking ourselves to start examining some of our deeply held beliefs and assumptions that are now so deeply held we don't even know that they exist, right? So if you think about entrepreneurship, in the entrepreneurial context, we've got to figure out how to get through the discovery phase, but we're doing it in sort of this off-trail way, right? We got to figure out how to make ourselves useful outside of the norm, outside of the known, outside of a prescribed path with predetermined rules, right? So the discovery begins. Very important point. There's lots of ambiguity. The context here matters a lot. There's a super high degree of ambiguity, right? You don't know what the heck is going on, right? You don't know what the rules are. There's no one there to tell you, hey, you got to take this course, that course, this course, that course. Then you get the biscuit and then you get the job. That's none of that's there. You're out in the woods with a sharp stick trying to figure out how to make yourself useful. The second contextual factor is you don't have any resources, right? You're very resource constrained. Those are not accidental or incidental. They are essential factors for creating an entrepreneurial mindset. My wife and I ate at a restaurant last night for the first and last time. It's a classic case. A guy sold his business, made a couple $1 million, wanted to open a barbecue place, you know, poorly trained staff, menu's no good, the furniture's all disjointed. The fact that he had money enabled him to open the whole damn business without really understanding what people want and need, right? Anyway, I don't want to digress on that point too far. The point I want to make here is the highly ambiguous, resource-constrained context of the discovery is critical to understand. The connection is found when you have evidence that you've created something useful. And that means people are using it. That means someone other than your mother-in-law is buying it. So there's like evidence that it's useful. It doesn't have to be currency. The point is, it's an evidence-based process, right? You could have a blog where you have 10,000 subscribers. There's evidence that you created something useful. You might have, offered a new course or a new process. People are using it. They're talking about it. It's an evidence-based process. The entrepreneur is not a gambler. He's not a fortune teller. They're actually highly risk-averse. They behave like detectives trying to solve mysteries, right? And that requires these entrepreneurial discovery skills, which basically I categorize in 3 chunks. They're problem-finding skills that requires empathy, curiosity, observation, questioning, like appreciative inquiry. Requires problem-solving skills. And it requires like self-awareness. It requires self-direction, an internal locus of control, the ability to tolerate ambiguity. That's a superpower. Talk about that later. You got to figure out how to learn on your own. You got to figure out how to unlearn and relearn on your own, right? You got to develop resilience. You got to keep getting up when you get knocked down, because that's going to happen to you a lot. So the definition of entrepreneurship is quite simple, and anyone can embrace this regardless of their charter, regardless of their course of in life, regardless of their position, regardless how much money they have in their pocket, regardless of their degree. It's an opportunity discovery process. And I don't imagine that everyone on this call wants to start a business, but I seriously doubt there's anyone on this call that does not want to discover an opportunity. So, what is opportunity discovery? This is super important. Here's a Venn diagram. What are you naturally interested in? Like, what do you do on your own time, right? Where are your interests? And where are your abilities? What is the intersection of those two things? The intersection of your natural interests, which, by the way, you don't get to choose, right? They came on the hard drive. Yeah, you're interested in basketball because you grew up in California, but you have interests that are unique to you. That's really interesting in and of itself. But the point here is the intersection of your own interests and abilities creates an authenticity that becomes like unstoppable, right? Nobody can compete with you at being you, right? Then when you can figure out how to serve the needs of other humans with your natural interests and abilities, that's where that magic happens. As educators, that's what our jobs are, right? We're just so used to doing it in this controlled way You know, here's another homework assignment. Start journaling about what does the word career path mean to you, right? Maybe you can tease out some of your antiquated assumptions, assuming you have antiquated assumptions. I'm not assuming you do. But that's what our roles are as educators, is to help our students find that intersection. And when we frame it in this way, it changes everything in the student's mind, right? Here's the fun fact. Entrepreneurial attitudes and skills are 21st century skills. They're the same damn skills that employers demand, that educators are saying, thought leaders are saying, this is what every student's going to need to learn to adapt and thrive in the 21st century. They're not calling them entrepreneurial skills. They're calling them soft skills, which is, you know, criminal in my view, right? Soft is really hard. So quickly, I want to talk a little bit about what is a mindset, right? Everybody uses that word without a lot of a clear understanding of what it means. And I'm going to be very brief here, right? My short definition is it's the underlying beliefs and tacit assumptions that influence our behavior. There's a great quote from the psychologist R.D. Laing, in which he said, the range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there's nothing we can do until we notice how failing to notice limits our thoughts and deeds. You got to go look it up. And maybe I'll put it in the notes here and send it to you afterwards. But it's the deeply held beliefs, right? That's what the mindset is about. It's the beliefs that we acquire without even being aware that we acquired them. So here are some fun facts about how our mindset works. It's acquired mostly unconsciously through social influence and our own individual construal or a subjective interpretation of the world around us, right? And as Daniel Kahneman and others have pointed out, your view of the world and of yourself is not an accurate view. One of the things I've been writing about and thinking about lately is, you know, there's a gap for all of us between what we think we're capable of and what we're actually capable of. There's also a gap in the world between what the world thinks is possible and what is actually possible. And we should always be exploring those gaps. Mind the gap, as the Canadians say, right? Again, the mindset resides beneath our conscious awareness. Our brains are always seeking to automate whatever it possibly can in order to reduce the cognitive load. Our brains rely on heuristics and mental models and rules of thumb so we don't have to relitigate everything in our lives. Like, how the heck do I put my pants on in the morning, right? But that's part of the problem. Some of these assumptions then become so automatic that they're steering our lives and we don't even know it, right? Mindset operates effortlessly without our awareness. It's subject to all manner of cognitive biases. The point here is that a mindset in motion tends to stay in motion because of cognitive biases, right? Disconfirming beliefs, your brain rejects them, right? Your brain tends to pick out things. It's called a confirmation bias, right? There's another interesting bias called the self-serving bias. When things go right in your life, you tend to take credit for it. When they go wrong in your life, you tend to blame, right? We all do that. We do that individually and collectively. There's all these biases that keep us stuck in this orbit, right? Mindset draws from the past. It's a self-authoring software program. It draws from the past to navigate the future. And that's great when the future looks like the past, but it's problematic when the future doesn't look like the past. What should keep us all awake at night is that our mindset influences all aspects of our life. The choices we make, our level of motivation, our ability to think and rational clearly. It determines the goals we choose for ourselves. It determines the extent to which we'll stick with our goals in the face of adversity. It's having all these profound effects on our lives without our awareness. So here's how it works. On the surface is what you see, what you can hear, what you can observe. Beneath the surface is what we know, and what we say we value, right? But our mindset is made up of these implicit knowledge and deeply held values, taken for granted beliefs, tacit assumptions, right? What shows up on the surface is, more likely to be the result of our deeply held beliefs rather than our explicit knowledge. Another way to think about this is a mindset is a belief system that is perfectly designed to create the outcomes it's creating. Right? That's the way to think about a mindset. It's a belief system that's perfectly designed to create the outcomes, right? So how do you see this in your everyday life, right? I ask people like this, like, are you constantly learning and growing and challenging yourself? Because if you're not, your mindset betrays your deepest beliefs. How you spend your discretionary time, thought, resources says everything about your deepest beliefs, right? People ask me, Gary, how do you read so much? How come how do you do that? And that question always perplexes me. It's like, well, why aren't you doing that? I can't figure out why people aren't always learning, right? Why aren't they always growing? So after interviewing 500 plus or minus entrepreneurs all over the globe on 5 continents, I've come to believe that there's this core assumption in the entrepreneurial mind. And it's the assumption that it's up to me to figure out how to make myself useful to other humans. And the more useful I become to others, the better off I'm going to be, not only in economic terms, but in terms of social integration, in terms of psychological well-being, in terms of individual growth, right? To me, this is about self-actualization. It's not a business discipline. So these 5 mechanisms of the mindset that I'll just talk about briefly. Self-efficacy beliefs, right? Deeply held beliefs on whether I can achieve the goals that I set for myself, right? Like a helpless orientation is on the other end of that spectrum. Locus of control, deeply held belief that either you are in charge of your life, or fate or luck or circumstances or powerful others are somehow controlling your life. Are you intrinsically motivated? Is the task itself the reward, or are you extrinsically motivated? Are you doing this to get a safe, secure job? Are you doing it for a steady paycheck? Are you doing it to get the gold star or the teacher's approval, right? Big difference there. Do you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset? Do you believe your intelligence, your abilities are malleable, or do you believe they're fixed? That makes a huge impact on the goals you set for yourself, right? Are you resilient? Resilience comes from what psychologists call an optimistic explanatory style. What's the story you tell yourself when things go wrong? This is permanent, this is pervasive, this is personal, or are you telling yourself this is fixable, this is temporary, this is local, right? The story you tell yourself matters a lot. But again, these are deeply held beliefs. We're not walking around saying, hey, Rob, how you doing? My name's Gary. I have an external locus of control, right? But it shows up in my behavior because I start complaining all the time. And I'm not saying, hey, Rob, the life sucks and, because I'm powerless. I'm blaming everyone else, but it's the outward manifestation of a much deeper unconscious belief that there's nothing I can do, right? Okay, so now I want to introduce you to Uncle Cleve. So in my travels to interview entrepreneurs all over the world, I came across this guy named Clifton Talbert, who I met in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2008, I think it was, part of a research project for the Cisco Entrepreneur Institute. He was, among other accomplishments, he was one of the founders of the Stairmaster Exercise Company. And I said, you know, what influenced you in your life to think like an entrepreneur? And he pulled this picture out of a shoebox and he explained to me that he was born in the Mississippi Delta in the 1940s. He was born to a teenage mom, didn't know a father. His life was relegated to the cotton field since he was 4 or 5 years old. And he said, it was this man, it was my Uncle Cleve, and he owned the local ice house. And this is the guy that taught me how to think like an entrepreneur. And so that became the basis for a book that Chuck mentioned this, that Clifton and I wound up co-authoring. It's gone all over the world, been translated into multiple languages. With initial funding from Kauffman, it was made into the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program, which is now being taught in classrooms and communities all over the world and also translated into multiple languages. So I want to tell you about 5 of these observations that I got. There's 8 of them total, and I want to leave some time here, so I'm going to very briefly talk about 5 fundamental concepts that I've observed in these everyday, unlikely, underdog type entrepreneurs. The first thing is, I'm calling it choice. And what I noticed right away, if you interview an entrepreneur, and Rob, you can attest to this because you've been an entrepreneur. Like,
it could be argued, I still am.
Okay, there you go. But like, if you talk to an entrepreneur, very quickly, they're going to start to articulate a compelling goal. They're going to start, they'll use the vision word or something they're trying to make happen, right?
Or I have a problem I have to solve.
There's a problem they have to solve, but it's a problem that has meaning. It's not a problem my boss told me to solve. It's like I have some connection to this problem. And so that seems very straightforward, right? But look around you and ask the people around you, do you have a compelling goal? And the next question is like, if not, why not? And I'm sorry to say this, but like retirement is not a compelling goal, right? And that's something you really don't have control over. That's just something you're enduring. But this is a very, very important distinguishing factor. What the literature tells us is that the single distinguishing factor that helps people get out of poverty in a single generation is a future positive cognitive orientation, right? And so that's part of your homework. Do you have a compelling goal? And when I say compelling, I mean something you're working on Friday night, Sunday morning, something that you can't stop thinking about. You're calling your friends at 8 o'clock on Friday night. Hey, I was thinking about this, right? In the absence of a compelling goal, it's unlikely that you're going to become who you can become. It's just unlikely. Here's another way of saying this. This is social psychology 101. If you want to understand why the entrepreneur is so engaged, so resilient, so resourceful, so creative, so committed, stop looking at the individual's traits and look at the goal they're pursuing and their relationship to that goal, and you'll understand the behavior. It has little to nothing to do with their dispositional traits. So for heaven's sake, let's stop thinking of entrepreneurship in this binary way. You either are or you're not, right? All right, I went a little long on choice, sorry. They tend to see problems as opportunities, right? They look at every problem, every frustration, every unmet need as a potential opportunity. How could we solve this? where those of us who kind of get trapped in this employee paradigm, we tend to say, well, that's not my problem, right? It's not my department. It's not, we tend to avoid problems or try to escape them, where the entrepreneurs tend to approach them and look at them as challenges or puzzles or mysteries to be solved, right? And therein lies the thinking. And Rob, you can also attest to this. You know, my wife gets mad at me because we walk into restaurants and like right away, I'm like criticizing, like, why aren't they doing this? Like, I'm always going through these calisthenics, if you will. If this were mine, how would I be making it better? I'm always thinking that way. It's become a heuristic. It's become a deeply ingrained a mental activity. The third thing I observe in entrepreneurs is they have a bias towards action. And the data supports this. You know, I'm sorry to say this to a group of like business, small business types, but the data supports the idea that most entrepreneurs aren't spending a lot of time writing business plans. And this is where all the daggers come out, right? What do you mean? Just hold on before you start. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I'm just trying to tell you what the data show, right? But there's also a little hidden secret here. What they're doing, this is bias for action, is they're acting like an organism. They're micro-experimenting. The entrepreneur is teasing out latent opportunities that are present but not visible. They're teasing out latent potential in themselves that's present and not visible. And so under those circumstances, planning is absolutely useless. It's worse than useless. It's detrimental. Right? What they're doing, this is a logic that the scholar Sarah Sarasvathy calls effectual reasoning. Most of us have been taught to figure everything out before you go. And that's super important when the cost of failure is high. You should definitely look both ways before you cross the street. But very few of us have ever been taught the inverse to that logic, which is that you have to go in order to know. You have to like learn how to experiment. That's the way forward in ambiguity. That's how you survive in uncharted territory when all you have is a sharp stick. You're very hungry. You see a bush full of red berries. You don't go up and, berries you've never seen before. If you go up and start gorging yourself on these unknown berries, there's a good chance you're going to die. What do? You take a berry and you rub it on your lips and see if it's sweet, see if it makes you, your lips swell up or makes you nauseous, right? You learn to experiment. That's how you increase the likelihood of survival, through micro-experimentation. And the next thing, this is perhaps one of the most exciting things we see in entrepreneurs, is they're learning machines, right? They're always learning. They have this very profound motivation to learn. Why? Because they don't assume that someone else is going to tell them how to do it. They're often uncharted territory, right? So they have assumption. The locus of control for learning has been shifted to an internal locus of control. But here's the thing. They're not necessarily learning in formal learning structures. They're more likely to adopt informal and non-formal learning. They're Audible subscribers. They're YouTube watchers. They network with other entrepreneurs, right? They're reading a book. They're just always learning, because the more they learn, the more they can expand and grow. It's really a natural thing. So the last thing I want to talk about here is persistence. And this is the 8th of the 8 life lessons. This was the 5th thing I'm going to talk about today. We see a high degree of resilience in entrepreneurs. And we know from the literature that resilience comes from an optimistic explanatory style, right? It comes from telling yourself this is temporary, this is local, this is fixable. The point that I want to really make here is that You know, I talked about internal locus of control, a high degree of self-efficacy, intrinsic motivation, a growth mindset, persistence. People look at those things and think you need those to be a successful entrepreneur. No, you don't. You need to start on the journey, and you'll develop those things as the result of pursuing a compelling goal. My point is, we got the cause and effect correlation backwards. The internal locus of control, the resilience, the growth mindset, and so forth, those are more likely to be the effects of entrepreneurial activity than they are the cause, right? So I'm going to kind of end on this note, right? This is from Alvin Toffler's book, Future Shock, in which he described that in some point in the future, and I think we're there now, that the rate of change is going to exceed our ability, the human ability to adapt. I don't believe we're there. I believe we're struggling to adapt because most of us are still trapped in an employee paradigm. We're waiting for someone else to tell us what the path is, what the rules are. And we've lost sight of the fact that we can figure it out for ourselves. So that's just the final thought. If you want to engage more with our work, you can buy the book. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it in bookstores. We just released an audible version of it. The voice actor for Uncle Cliff and Uncle Cleve and Clifton, he's the guy that read Jackie Robinson's memoir, does an amazing job. It'll take you right there. The guy that read for me in that book read Bill Clinton's autobiography. So I'm really, really happy and excited about the audible version of the book, but it's an easy way to engage with us. We have a self-paced version of the Ice House Entrepreneurship program. It's on our website. You can take it. It's $99. We cut the price in half, like in the post-COVID world. Lots of folks unemployed, struggling, trying to figure out how to navigate. If you want to learn how to become a certified facilitator, unfortunately, we just sold out the July training. I know at least one of you is already enrolled in the July training. We have another public training happening in November. You can register for that on our website if you're interested in that. And that's all I got to say about that. I'm going to stop talking. I went a little bit long, but I can stay a little late if you guys have time. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. This is great stuff. So if we have some questions, we have some time. So if you guys could type those in the chat box. But yeah, I'll start off with a question for you too, Gary. Just when you were talking about the transformational theory showing going from discovery to growth to reinvention, I think a lot of our businesses were in that growth phase before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And I was just interested in your thoughts on obsolescence. Sometimes obsolescence can creep up on you, slowly, but then other times in this case, all of a sudden dining, indoor dining was obsolete, within 2 weeks or whatever it is.
Right.
And I'm kind of worried too that we're kind of an artificial environment where it might be temporary obsolescence too. Like I know a lot of our colleges are still planning to be online in the fall, but maybe our economy, every other sector of the economy is going to be opened up except for the colleges, and who knows, a year from now, maybe people won't even be thinking about, COVID-19. So I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on how do you recognize obsolescence, and do you enter a discovery phase again?
a temporary setback as opposed to a structural shift is the question you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Chuck, and I think about that a lot. And that's part of it. Like you never know, right? But the problem is, the longer you languish, the more trouble you're likely to be in, right? And that's like, and I don't have like an algorithm for you. I don't have a framework for thinking about that. But what happens is very often, Chuck, we start telling ourselves this is temporary when it's not.
Yeah.
Right? And so, because what happens when the growth starts to slow, we go into denial. We start denying these things, right? what Land calls it, we tend to go into a siege mentality. That's what Land calls it. At that second break point, we just hunker down and we sort of cling to what we've always done, and we try to do it harder, faster, cheaper. And it sometimes it's the solution, right? For, a temporary thing, it's the solution. But how I would address that for someone that is in a restaurant business, especially somebody who's new to the restaurant business, wow.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question, Chuck.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And I think what we'll find out probably is we'll discover certain things that will not be obsolete that we keep after the pandemic. And then there'll be certain things that you have to do new, but there'll be certain things that'll.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly right. But I think I'm going to answer your question in a little bit different way, Chuck, like in a mindset kind of a way. It causes us to check our assumptions about stability.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's part of the human condition. We're all seeking stability, right? There's this tension between our need for stability and certainty and our need for vitality and growth. And those two things are pulling us in two different directions. And the way forward is through what I would call dynamic stability. And what I mean by that is, you're vulnerable to the extent that you expect the future to be like the past.
Yeah.
You're vulnerable to the extent to which you expect linearity, to which you expect, clearly defined paths, well-ordered situations, rule-bound structures. Those are relics of the past that we're still clinging to.
Right.
We think of entrepreneurs as like rule breakers. They're not rule breakers in a sense that they're just, rebellious. Nassim Taleb put it in a little snarkier way. The market is smarter than your boss. Right? Like what the entrepreneur learns to do is like a hunter-gatherer. I'm not paying attention to the rules. I'm paying attention to needs. I'm paying attention to which way the wind's blowing and what the flora and fauna are doing. And I don't have an expectation of stability.
Yeah.
And that makes me stronger than someone who does.
Other questions from the group. I don't see anything in the chat. If you want to type anything in the chat, or I guess we could, here's one. Let's see, from George. Does the entrepreneur have to learn and be good at product, marketing, and finances, or should the entrepreneur also partner with those who are?
Ooh, really good question, George. Use transformation theory in your mind here, right? So the discovery phase is the phase in which the entrepreneur is trying to figure out, is searching for evidence of a useful thing, right? And once they have adequate evidence that there's enough need for this thing that I can make a go of it, then you're going to have to figure out the marketing, the finance, or whatever. You're going to need the managerial skills. Now, here's the rub. I'm the idea guy. I've always got new ideas. My problem is shutting them off, right? Very few people, like if somebody's like really into the ideas, they struggled when it comes to phase 2, where they got to replicate, they got to get disciplined, they got to do it over and over and over again. And again, those two skills are kind of at odds with each other. And a lot of entrepreneurs fail because they either they can't transition into a managerial role, or they can't recognize the need to do the same. So The number 2 guy at Eli is a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force. You understand? I've hired for my weakness.
Mm-hmm.
That's the answer to the question, George. It's a really, really good question.
Yeah, I think that's true. Entrepreneurs have to recognize what their weaknesses are and then hire people that have strengths in those areas versus
correct. And you know, some of you have probably been around a startup where it's like, okay, we've got evidence, it's go time, and the entrepreneur is still stuck in experimentation land. It's like, no, you got to turn that off now. And you guys probably see it as advocates. You know, when you're working with entrepreneurs, they can't make that switch.
Yeah. We have time for maybe one more question. Is there any other questions out there? Or we can also, if someone want to ask a question verbally, we could try that real quick.
You guys are all just stupefied, I can tell, right?
Hi, Gary.
Yes.
I just wanted to see if you just had a few ideas around being able to foster and support more entrepreneurship and more entrepreneurial mindset within the community college system.
Ooh, that's where I live, Kim. Thank you for that. I'll give you $20 later for asking that question, right? So you know, that's the real challenge, Kim, and that's what a lot of my work is. And I'm working on a new book. I was talking to Chuck about that before we got on the call. Like, we got to get people to understand entrepreneurship beyond business.
Mm-hmm.
Like, stop thinking about this as a business discipline.
Right.
I'm not really answering your question. I'm just going off at the mouth now.
That's okay. It's all helpful.
It's like when you see an entrepreneur, what you're seeing is a human being striving to self-actualize.
Mm-hmm.
And what's enabled me to get as far as I have in this work is that I don't see it as a business discipline. I see it as a behavioral phenomenon. I see these people of average intelligence, of average means, doing amazing things outside of formal learning structures, outside of the guidance of a formal, you know, I mean, in a lot of ways, we're like in the business of lecturing birds on how to fly, right? But I'm not trying to promote myself, Kim. I'm just saying, like, that's what I'm trying to accomplish in my new book, because that's where the real obstacles are. Most of us see it in a binary way. Okay, let's put an entrepreneurship program off in the corner somewhere. Let's open a makerspace, check that box, and keep doing what we're doing, right? The World Economic Forum, the OECD, they're all saying, it's no. We got to shift entrepreneurship from the perimeter to the core. But academic systems tend to be bureaucratic, and they're staunchly committed to column 2, right? So I don't have an easy answer. I mean, a lot of what I did in pre-COVID world was the keynote to do that, to just sort of like, you know, a redefining entrepreneurship keynote to help stakeholders get it. I'm doing that, you know, virtually now, but I just did this at Concordia College in Fargo, Moorhead, next to Fargo. Mm-hmm. But that's the big question, Kim. It really is, and I really thank you for that question. It's we got to help the world understand.
Yeah, and all of you faculty, community colleges, you can help us with that. So I think it looks like we're at our time here at noon, but I want to thank Gary again for coming in and presenting. This has been great. I love hearing you every time you speak. And
that's awesome. Thank you, Chuck.
We did record this today, and we'll be posting this on our website, and for people can view it at businessandentrepreneurship.net. So we'll get that up there probably maybe at the end of the day or so. Here, hopefully, I'll have it posted on our website. For those of you, you can forward it on to other people. But yeah, any other closing thoughts, Gary, that you want to say?
Yeah, I did have a closing thought for Kim. You know, one thing, one of the dean at this college in Fargo did was she did a book discussion group with the Ice House book with department chairs, and just like got them engaged like over Zoom over 4 weeks. Like, read the book and let's discuss these 8 concepts and what are the implications in higher education.
That's a great idea. Yeah,
that's a simple thing you can do. You know, you can buy the book for $12 on Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good idea.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think I've read the book about 10 times, and each time I read it, I get something new out of it. I love it.
That's
love your
awesome,
work.
Kim.
Yeah,
Thank you
true fan.
very much. Appreciate that.
And Gary, when are we going to see you in California again?
Oh, I can't. I'm going to move to California. I say this every time I see you, but like that's like when my book is done,
Yeah.
I'm moving to California.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Gary, and thank you everybody for attending our webinar today. And be sure to check in our website too for our future webinars. And want to hope everybody has a great weekend. So we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.